What sparked the Vietnam War? Let's go back and explore the choices that set off a conflict lasting for decades. We're diving into the full story of what sparked the Vietnam War. In this video, we'll uncover the choices and events that led to one of the most intense and transformative conflicts of the 20th century. From its colonial beginnings to the global powers that got involved, you'll get a clear picture of how this war unfolded. Greetings and welcome, history seekers. I'm Carolyn A. from GettingToTheRoots.com. Here, we're all about uncovering and celebrating your unique family history. Together, we'll explore and honor the stories that define us. Let's dive in. What events and struggles planted the seeds of the Vietnam War? The story of the Vietnam War starts back in the 1800s, when France took control of Vietnam, ruling it as a colony. For nearly a century, they took the country's resources and suppressed Vietnamese culture. The French profited from Vietnam's land and labor, but the Vietnamese people lived in harsh conditions and had little freedom. Tensions grew as the Vietnamese wanted independence, while the French refused to give up control. During World War II, Japan took Vietnam from France. However, when Japan lost the war in 1945, they gave up control. This created a power gap, and Vietnamese leaders saw a chance for true independence. Ho Chi Minh, a leader who wanted Vietnam free from foreign rule, acted fast. He formed the Viet Minh, a group fighting for independence, and declared Vietnam free. But France wouldn't let go. This clash of ideals sparked the First Indochina War, which dragged on for 8 brutal years. Finally, in 1954, the French lost a major battle at Dien Bien Phu. The defeat led to the Geneva Accords, which divided Vietnam into North and South. The North, led by Ho Chi Minh, was communist, while the South, backed by France and later the US, wanted to stay free from communism. This division set the stage for a new, longer conflict. How did Vietnam's fight for independence become a Cold War showdown? At first, Vietnam's struggle was a local one, but as the Cold War heated up, it became much bigger. Let's look at how major world powers got pulled in. The United States feared that communism would spread through Asia if North Vietnam succeeded in taking over the South. They called this the domino effect. The belief that if one country fell to communism, others would quickly follow. To prevent this, the US began supporting South Vietnam with money, advisors, and military help. In 1964, after an incident in the Gulf of Tonkin where US ships were allegedly attacked, America sent in full combat troops, turning the conflict into a major war. The Soviet Union saw this war as a way to limit US influence in Asia. They sent North Vietnam military aid, weapons, and supplies, strengthening the North and adding to the tension between the superpowers. China was another key player. Motivated by shared communist beliefs and a desire for regional influence, China provided North Vietnam with weapons, advisors, and other support. France had tried to keep control after World War II, but their defeat at Dien Bien Phu forced them to leave Vietnam. With France gone, the South was left without a strong ally, so the US stepped in. With communist allies supporting the North and Western allies backing the South, the fight in Vietnam quickly became part of the larger Cold War conflict. Who were the leaders who shaped the Vietnam War? Powerful leaders on both sides influenced the events before and during the war. In the United States, President Dwight D. Eisenhower began supporting South Vietnam, hoping to stop communism from spreading. President John F. Kennedy increased support, and after his assassination, President Lyndon B. Johnson escalated it further by sending in combat troops. In Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh led the Communist North. His goal was to unite the country under communism, and he inspired the North Vietnamese people. In the South, Ngo Dinh Diem was the first president, but his harsh rule led to protests and instability, making it hard for the South to unite against the North. In France, leaders like Charles de Gaulle accepted defeat after Dien Bien Phu and withdrew from Vietnam, creating a power vacuum that the US eventually filled. Each of these leaders made decisions that fueled the conflict and pulled more countries into the fight. What military tactics did the US use, and why didn't they work? When the US joined the war, they tried several tactics to win. Search and destroy missions were used to target Viet Cong fighters, communist guerrillas in South Vietnam. US troops would fly into an area, search for the enemy, engage them in combat, and then leave. However, because they didn't hold on to these areas, the Viet Cong often returned as soon as US forces left. Operation Rolling Thunder was a bombing campaign targeting North Vietnam's infrastructure and supply lines, including the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The goal was to weaken the North's ability to fight. However, this bombing campaign didn't have the impact the US hoped for, showing just how hard it was to fight a guerrilla army with traditional military tactics. The Tet Offensive in 1968 was a series of surprise attacks by North Vietnam and the Viet Cong on over 100 cities and bases in South Vietnam. Why did the Vietnam War face such strong opposition in the US? As the war dragged on, opposition grew back home in America. Protests erupted as people questioned why American soldiers were fighting in Vietnam. College campuses became hotspots for anti-war protests. The war's unpopularity led President Johnson to announce he wouldn't seek re-election. Anti-war sentiment shaped both the 1968 and 1972 presidential elections, with candidates promising to bring peace. Public pressure led Congress to question military strategies and rethink America's foreign policy with more caution. How did the Vietnam War finally end? Eventually, President Nixon introduced Vietnamization. This strategy aimed to reduce US involvement by training and equipping South Vietnamese troops to fight independently. In 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed, officially ending US military involvement, although the war continued between North and South Vietnam. In 1975, without US support, North Vietnamese forces launched a final offensive. South Vietnam, without American help, was unable to resist. Soon, North Vietnamese troops reached Saigon. Chaotic scenes of helicopters evacuating people from rooftops marked the end of American involvement. On April 30, 1975, Saigon fell, and the South Vietnamese government surrendered. Vietnam was reunified under communist rule, and Saigon was renamed Ho Chi Minh City. What impact did the Vietnam War leave on Vietnam and America? The Vietnam War left lasting scars on both Vietnam and the United States. In Vietnam, the war caused devastating damage. Chemicals like Agent Orange affected the environment and caused health problems that would last generations. The country faced years of rebuilding, and unexploded bombs posed dangers long after the fighting ended. Social and political changes under the new government shaped Vietnam's future. In the US, veterans came home to a country divided by the war. Many faced PTSD, substance abuse, and limited support. Public disillusionment with the war changed how America approached future conflicts, making people more cautious about military intervention. Returning home from Vietnam wasn't the end of the struggle for many veterans, including African American soldiers. The intense combat, exposure to toxic chemicals like Agent Orange, and the stress of guerrilla warfare left many with lasting physical and mental health challenges. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, was common among Vietnam veterans, causing flashbacks, anxiety, and difficulty adjusting back to civilian life. However, PTSD was poorly understood at the time, and mental health support was scarce. The effects of exposure to Agent Orange were especially devastating, leading to serious health issues such as respiratory problems, cancers, and even birth defects in their children. For years, veterans fought to have these health issues recognized and treated, and many continued to advocate for better support long after the war ended. Well, history seekers, that's a wrap. Subscribe for more history and untold stories from the past. Thanks for watching. Peace and love.